Robot Talk is the podcast that sits down with roboticists from around the world and asks them the questions you always wanted answered. Like, how does the robot cope with the cold? And how does that thing work? Hello everyone! Welcome to Robot Talk. I'm your host, Claire Asher, and today's episode is all about robots for exploring and monitoring remote aquatic environments, from polar oceans to glacial lakes, and the challenges of operating robots in these extreme conditions. But first, this is your regular reminder to join the Robot Talk community on Patreon, where you'll find exclusive behind-the-scenes updates, monthly bonus episodes, and opportunities to have your say about the future direction of the podcast. Check out patreon.com/Claire Asher to find out more. So, with all that said, I'm excited to introduce this week's guest. I recently had a fascinating conversation with Simona Aracri from the National Research Council of Italy about innovative robot designs for oceanography and environmental monitoring. This week, I'm speaking to Simona Aracri, a researcher at the National Research Council of Italy, whose work focuses on robotics for observational oceanography and environmental monitoring. Hi, Simona. Wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Claire. Thanks for having me.
So, to get us started, can you give us a little bit of an overview of your research on ocean observation robots?
So, as a background, I'm actually a physical oceanographer, but I did my bachelor and then master before my PhD in marine engineering and naval architecture.
Okay.
So the research that I'm doing now is basically the merging of the two topics, so engineering and physical oceanography. I'm very lucky because I'm part of a group that has lots of experience in extreme environments. So the research of the group, hence my research, mainly focuses on extreme environmental robotics. So robotics that is dedicated to monitor extreme environments such as the poles or the glaciers or areas where traditional oceanographic means or monitoring platforms are normally not working very well or they can't reach those regions.
Yeah.
This is what we focus on. It's also very important to have a very interdisciplinary group or diverse background because then we understand also what kind of data and how the data has to be collected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the environments that you've just mentioned, those kind of extreme environments, are also, many of them are the same that are being most rapidly affected by climate change. So, you know, it's really important that we're monitoring them. And if you're doing it with robots, that's cool.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. So often we say that the North Pole, for example, is usually affected by climate change, or anyway, any change that might happen to our planet is reflected often in the North Pole much quicker than it is in other parts of the world. We're also lucky because we are working very close to the Mediterranean. And another thing that we should know is that the Mediterranean offers oceanographic observations in the time scale that is comparable to the length of a human life. Normally, you know, oceanographic processes take much longer than a human life, hundreds of years. But in our case, with the Mediterranean, we can actually observe a whole evolution within our own lifetime, which is very lucky for us. Besides, you know, the third pole, which would be the glaciers, normally is also affected very quickly by changes. And this we actually see from year to year. From year to year, every time that we go to the glacier, there is a visible change. let alone the data, but you can see the retreat of the glaciers from one year to another.
Yeah, That's going to be quite tough to have to watch. So, yeah, a lot of our listeners are very interested in robotics, but might not know that much about ocean observation. So, typically what kind of data are you recording?
This is very interesting for us and for me in particular, because the data that we record are environmental data. So first of all, we have to monitor the physics of the water, which is my core business. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about physics of the water, we talk about temperature, salinity, and pressure.
Okay.
Which are the parameters that characterize water currents or water masses, for example. Mm-hmm. But depending on the mission and the project that we are working on at the moment, we change the other parameters. So, for example, in the glacial lakes, we monitor the pH and chlorophyll and turbidity, But depending on the probes that we have mounted on the robots and depending on the mission that we are embracing in that moment, the particular set of parameters that we are monitoring may change.
Sure, that makes sense.
The other very interesting thing for the roboticists, so for robotic sciences, is that we also record with the same care and with the same consistency. We also record data that describe the behavior of the robot. Mm. And this is something quite unprecedented, because this means that every time that we go from one mission to another, we don't have to start from scratch, at least data-wise. We know how the robot behaved in a certain scenario, so we can actually monitor also the evolution of our own robots, like our upgrades and the changes that we make to the robot from time to time. We have a fleet of robots, so it's not only one, but for each robot, we use the same approach. This is also very important, really crucial with this kind of data, because they're unique, so it's very difficult to validate this data. Right, we don't have a ground truth. And to value to the maximum this data, we need to be able to compare and to observe what's happening in the data in relation to what's happening to the robot. So they're kind of coupled. Mm-hmm. So it's important to interpret them together.
Yeah. Yeah, that must be a really interesting data set.
We hope so.
So you've worked on some quite unconventional designs for aquatic robots. I'm guessing in part because of these extreme environments that you're presented with. Can you describe some of the more unusual robots you've worked on and explain the applications they were designed for?
Really, all of the robots that we have are unique. So they're all completely different from anything that you can see outside. The latest ones that I worked with is the one that we developed with Marmot. Marmot is a project that is coming to an end this month, and it was dedicated to the monitoring of proglacial lakes. Mm-hmm. The robot, I think, it was really cool. Yeah. Because the idea behind the project, my colleague Angelo Odetti is the PI of this project, and basically the idea behind the whole project was to have a robot that would fit in a backpack. Okay. Because you can imagine that to get to a glacial lake, you have to walk on difficult terrain and normally for a few hours at least. And this robot is incredibly light. It's really portable. We often hear about portable robotics, but this is a truly portable robot. You fit it in your rucksack. And then we were a team of 5 in the mission. So each of us had a part, a sampler or a collection of sensors. And then when we got to the place, we basically mounted the robot all together. We assembled the robot on site.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's really the perfect example for modularity and reconfigurability. That is really the strength of the lab, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. I came across something that you'd worked on that involved soft robotics. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the soft robots you've worked on?
So our robots have elements, they're integrating now elements that are soft. In the past, my very first introduction to soft robotics was during a project that I worked when I was in Scotland at the University of Edinburgh. And the project was called ORCA Hub. It was a multi-university project, very big. And at the time, I didn't know anything about what soft robots were. So I found out that actually there are materials that are soft, so elastomers, that are used as robots. Like they make the bulk of some robots.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be useful in a variety of scenarios. We published at the time about our perspective on the use of soft robots in marine environments and in stream environments too. But in our case, at the moment, what we think is useful and what we are working on is going to be the integration between our unconventional robots and soft end effectors.
Okay.
You know, the hybrid combination, having something that is reliable and at least mechanically, conventionally built, and a material that is not usually employed in the ocean, can open a variety of applications that were out of reach before. One of these applications can be, for example, delicate sampling.
Mm-hmm.
So in collaboration with IIT, we integrated soft arm bio-inspired on one of our robots. And the idea is to have an end effector that can adapt to the shape of whatever it has to sample. And this is good if the sample is delicate. So imagine a living organism or even a coral among living organisms.
Yeah.
Also, it's good if the end effector has to adapt to a shape that was not known before. So imagine marine debris. Oh, one of the use cases that we described is ghost gears. So ghost gear is what fishing activities leave behind at sea.
Right, okay. So, I mean, you know, in theory, you could use this as not just an ocean observation robot, but an ocean cleanup robot. Maybe not the most efficient one.
Yeah, it can be useful in some cases. In cases where you have to operate in pristine environments like marine protected areas, or as we were saying before, the North Pole or the South Pole, those areas still have quite a low human impact.
Yeah.
So we try to preserve them as much as we can. But our robots are all incredibly environmentally mindful in the sense that they are made not to interact with the environment apart from collecting data or few samples, very targeted samples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that leads really nicely onto an audience question that we had from Matt on Blue Sky. So Matt says, how do we ensure that using robots in the sea does not harm wildlife or inadvertently alter their natural behavior, especially for electrical signals, sonar, etc.?
So the problem with sonar is real, especially when you operate with on board, because you have powerful systems there, and there are regulations in place to perform experiments that involve sound in the ocean. Mm-hmm. We know that the sound can be disruptive for marine life. So when you're on board and you have big platforms, then it's important to have mammal observers, for example, or put in place those regulations. For example, you need a ramp up with the sound so that whatever animal that can be disturbed by the sound has the time to flee the area, anyway, to clear the area. For us, our platforms are very small, so the sound is not particularly impactful and is not always used. Mm-hmm. Also, as I was saying, the robots are really thought for not harming the environment. For example, there is a surface catamaran that we use, that we designed, and this catamaran has propellers that are flushed with the hull. This means that it's very difficult for the propellers to catch something from the outside. So much so that it could, in theory, operate in areas where there are people swimming, or even in port areas.
Okay. So what kind of sensors are you using to navigate the environment? Is it mainly sonar? Are you using cameras? How does the robot know where it is and where it's going?
This is a very interesting question. So for the surface one, we can see them, so that's okay. We can pilot them from the shore remotely. For the underwater ones, especially under the ice, we have a system in place. So we use a communication system that has 2 GPSs at the surface and a USBL at the bottom, so mounted on the robot. So With this system, we're able to locate precisely where the robot is, even if it is under the ice.
Okay. What is a USBL?
So USBL stands for Ultra Short Baseline.
Okay.
So it's an underwater acoustic positioning system.
Right, okay.
It works with acoustics.
Gotcha. And have you ever had wildlife come and interact with your robots?
Yes. When the team was in Antarctica, we have plenty of videos of animals and also photos of animals that jump up from the holes in the ice because they're not used to have human around. So they're just very curious. So lots of seals often come closer to see what's happening, or penguins. So yes, the answer is yes.
That sounds like fun. As you mentioned, you were previously involved in the ORCA Hub, and that research program was focused on robotics and autonomous systems for offshore energy. And you were focused on robotic sensors. So can you tell us a little bit more about your work on this project?
Yes. At the time, my PI was Adam Stokes, professor at the University of Edinburgh, and I was postdoc there. And as I mentioned before, that was my first introduction to soft robotics or even robotics for offshore environments. What we did within the project was developing this platform called the Limpet, which was a multi-sensing platform, very portable, small. The board, the electronic board, was smaller than a cell phone. And in that case, what was interesting for me was working on the kind of sensors and also the location of the sensors on offshore platforms. There are offshore platforms of various nature. It can be wind platform or oil platform. And depending on the kind of infrastructure, you need to monitor different things. So in that case, we managed to come up with a system to do some edge processing, which means enable the board to filter the data already on the board, so to output data that were already useful for us. And that is when I first thought about the combination of data in unconventional platforms and data in oceanography. Oceanography has a very, very long tradition for data. So you have data that were collected by hand by mariners. So consistency is the key there, because independently from who or what is recording the data, the time series are still consistent, are still valuable for everybody.
Yeah.
And in the ORCA Hub developing the Limpet, what we thought was, so how can we use the data in a way that can be meaningful for us? So we came up with bespoke algorithms, for example, to detect the passage of the blades of a wind platform.
Okay, so the absence of that would tell you that the wind turbine's not working anymore, I guess.
Yes, for example, the idea behind the study was to demonstrate that it is possible to create an autonomous system that would prompt an alert if there is something that is not working on the platform.
Yeah.
And again, there was this idea of portability, so something that is light and cost effective that can be deployed on the platform very easily.
Yeah.
The difference between there and then is that the robots that we create now have to perform in these environments. They have to work in the lab, so demonstrate their capacity here. But then whenever they're shipped to the Arctic or Antarctica, there is no way around for them to work. In fact, the team that we choose to go on these missions is really key, because you need people with experience and incredibly skilled too.
Yeah, absolutely. How much autonomy do the robots you work with have? I mean, are they remote controlled completely, or are they doing some stuff on their own?
Depends. Depends. A good example of this is the robot I was talking about that was in Antarctica. It's called Proteus. And it's really the perfect example of reconfigurability too, because that robot was capable to navigate in different configurations. So depending on the configuration, obviously this changes. So it could work fully autonomously, so without a tether underwater, doing its own mission and then come back. It could work tethered, so with a cable attached, where we could control the movements and the behavior of the robot in general. It could also work on the surface, so navigate as a catamaran, or also semi-submerged. And the application for it to work as a catamaran was actually really interesting. We created hulls so that it could host a Harvey cylinder, which is a big 1.20 meter long glass cylinder. It's dedicated to sample the surface micro layer of the ocean.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it must be nerve-wracking to like release the robot on its own and just have to sit and wait for it to come back and hope that it comes back safely.
Yeah, like before my time here, I remember that they lost a balloon, I think, something like that in the Arctic. But the excuse that we always use is, it's either the robot or people.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So the robot is made to be put in danger. Often for some operation, divers are still used in Antarctica.
Yeah.
You can imagine how dangerous. Yeah. Exactly. And even in offshore platform, and this was the narrative behind the ORCA Hub, to remove the personnel from dangerous or tedious tasks. In this case, it's mainly about danger. And also, a diver can collect data and even bring a camera and record some data, but you can stay under the ice for, I don't even know whether you can reach half an hour. Whereas our robots, going back to the autonomy question, can navigate for hours.
Yeah.
At the very least. Then depending on, the configuration and what they're actually doing, but hours at the very least.
Yeah, I guess you're limited by like battery life rather than the need to breathe.
Exactly. And in that case, to survive the cold, because your body really shuts down in the cold.
How well do like electronics and mechanical components cope with the cold?
So I think that the answer to that is only one: spare pieces. Like whenever you organize such a mission, you have to have spare pieces, and especially batteries. Batteries are a problem in the cold. So they might perform wonderfully here in the lab, but in very cold temperature, not so much.
Yeah.
And even with that, really, I have to praise the technical team, because our team is really wonderful for these missions. Extreme environments means pristine, means interesting, but really means also extremely low logistics. So you're on your own most of the time, but you have to solve the problems on your own.
Yeah. So as well as working on like the design of ocean-going robots and their sort of data collection missions, you're interested in the analysis of that data and its applications in the real world. Why do you think it's important to be involved in this whole process from start to finish?
So I think that understanding how the data are collected and why, it's the very baseline to start actually to monitor the environment. So if it's possible for one person to understand the design of a robot, so where you might put the sensors and how long the robot might be able to go, how deep, and what it can actually do whenever it is either at the surface or under the water, it's very important. So once you have this kind of familiarity with the platforms that you're using, then it's also easier to interpret the data. So you understand why the data has been collected that way, and why you see a spike, or whether it is a spike in the data or not. So being involved in every step of the process, from the design to the integration until the deployment, and then the retrieval of the data and the study of the data, I think gives you a knowledge and an overview that without it, you wouldn't be able to value these missions or the data as much as we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, your combination of like the background in oceanography and engineering must be a real asset, because I've interviewed quite a lot of roboticists who've done various different environmental monitoring work. And they often say to me, we chat to ecologists or biologists or whatever to find out what they need and things like that. But you don't, you've already got an appreciation of both sides of it, which must make your life a lot easier.
A lot easier and a lot busier.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. Like, of course, it's good and bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot know absolutely everything all the time.
Course,
so I feel, at least, I'm constantly learning from my colleagues, from people that I meet at conferences and meetings. And at the same time, it is good because, as we were saying before, you have a feeling of how things should look. Yeah. Like when you look at the data and you know how the data come out from a very well-established platform, you're like, okay, so we are this far away. This is what we have to do. This is what we need to get the data in a state that everybody will be able to understand it.
Yeah.
And that obviously requires a bit of work, but I think it's rewarding, and it's really interesting to actually see a phenomena happening in the data.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the truth. I love this because at the end of the day, what you see there is the truth, or is as close to the truth as you can get. It's a number.
Yeah, and it's, sometimes it's phenomenon or data that no one's been able to access before. So it's really novel and exciting.
Yes, true.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area of research. Simona, it's been really fun chatting to you today. I've been talking to Simona Aracri from the National Research Council of Italy. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. It's been lovely.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy Robot Talk, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the podcast, subscribe, and leave a review. And check out @Robot Talk Pod on social media to see a photo of the Marmot portable robot for monitoring proglacial lakes. Next week, I'm chatting to Rich Walker from Shadow Robot Company about dexterous robot hands. Until then, I've been Claire Asher, and this has been Robot Talk. Robot Talk Season 6 is sponsored by the Hamlin Centre, Imperial College London.